maybe this was already there a little bit, but I think it planted the seed of leading from influence, that you do not need the title to be effective, that you actually need to be able to work cross collaboratively, and the amount of buy-in and rapport building and trust that is required to then actually create change. It's a creative process. Like, you can't just come in, like, there was a lot of resistance from the folks who were working on the line of like, oh, new person, new flavor, what's the, and so that was one piece. The other piece is like coming back to the people, just the range of positions from like an hourly, just starting individual on the line to like engineering managers, and the level of drive and passion, and everybody wants meaning and mattering. Again, regardless of where you sit in an organization, it takes all the pieces and all the
Right.
individuals like showing up to make a thing work.
Yeah,
And
100%.
so, and the people make it really interesting. Like, if you
Yeah.
can keep the culture connected and real and authentic and open, transparent. That was the other big thing I will say, like, and I always say through any change, the most important thing is communication, transparent
Right.
communication over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
And
so
listening is
critical.
part of
Yeah.
that, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
not just talking at, you gotta
Yeah.
also do the other half.
Yeah.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun at all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Palacio and Partners, providing turnkey podcast creation, hosting, production, promotion, and related creative resources for you and your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Ari DeGrote. Ari is the founder of Upward and Inward, providing executive coaching for peak performers and entrepreneurs. She thrives as an influential catalyst, moving teams from complacency to connected impact. Through the Impact Empowerment Program, she transforms high-potential employees and next-level leaders into collaborative teams of true impact leaders. You can learn more about Ari at upwardandinward.com. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Ari.
Ari, welcome to the Corporate Couch this afternoon.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. This is going to be fun. You and I met, I believe, when you reached out to me on LinkedIn. So we were not introduced.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's great. We had a nice conversation. I think it was January of 24 at
Yeah.
the local Pilgrim Coffee, a very great connection spot for all the networking people in Kansas City, especially Southern Kansas City Metro. So
Awesome.
yeah, excited to talk to you. I love leadership development. You have such an interesting career. I love how you did kind of the corporate thing at Sprint, now T-Mobile Accelerator, and you're one of the few people I know. You've kind of had some other things, but you're like been in leadership development, since college. You had a
Yeah.
major in organizational leadership. So yeah, very excited. So yeah, let's start with a fun question though, Ari. What one thing would surprise people about you, even people that know you fairly well?
I'm not from Kansas City. That always somehow surprises people. I've moved around quite a bit.
Yeah.
And we'll see if this is true, but the story in my family, I have a brother and a sister that are 12 and 15 years, ahead of me. And they're like, oh, you were the accident. But in fact, I was a New Year's resolution. That is the
Oh,
story.
wow.
So yes.
A new What was the New Year's resolution? Your parents wanted to have more sex. What was the actual resolution?
I mean, I stopped asking at that point because I didn't need all those
That's a
details.
good one. I like.
I was thankful that I was here.
I'm about 10 and a half years younger than my brother, so I always thought I was a mistake, but no one's ever confirmed or denied that, so it's all good. So that's funny though. Where did you grow up?
In Ohio, a small town called Trenton, and it's kind of in between Cincinnati and Dayton.
Okay.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was a great place to grow up.
Yeah. I thought it might be because I know you went to Miami University, but what was fun for you growing up? What you loved doing as a kid?
I honestly, I was like one of those kids that was just like outside and gone, like
Yeah, yeah,
running around the neighborhood
yeah.
barefoot with my like group of friends getting
Right.
into, I mean, we would for a good chunk of my like childhood, there was a cornfield on the end of our street. And so
Hmm.
we'd sneak out there and launch like bottle rockets and
Oh, wow.
see, like we this is a funny one. Like when we were little, I remember playing and they we were playing in somebody's sandbox or something, and we saw like heard this crazy noise and saw fire. We thought there was a dragon.
Okay.
And we went chasing, and it was like this whole epic thing, and we found and it was a hot air balloon like landing in one of the
Oh my
fields.
God, that's
And
funny.
yeah, like so it's
Yeah.
like just, back when we weren't all tethered to our phones and
Yeah.
it, the freedom of having a bike and riding all over the place. It was
Right.
great.
Being outside. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's fun. Any aspirations growing up? Like, hey, when I'm an adult, I want to be this.
Honestly, I always felt I was really into writing and all of that. So that was one piece. And then I like the life sciences, particularly how the human body works and all of our interconnected systems. I really, there was like a hard split. And I think, at some point I got really interested in psychology kind of through that, which then led me to see like some of the opportunities that I ended up going into around like change management and leadership. But yeah, several areas of interest that I think still connect in some really interesting ways, even though it's not like directly
Yeah,
work
sure.
related. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So I saw you graduated with a business with focus on organizational leadership and a Spanish minor. So was that your original goal when you were 18 and it started your fall semester?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I added that. I was already pretty deep into Spanish, and it just made sense, I
Hmm.
was really intrigued. The idea of like being able to travel and opening up like possible connection lanes to people who don't speak my language
Sure.
was so interesting. And I did, I was very lucky actually to be able to do a summer abroad in college. And it was split between Costa Rica and Mexico, and we
Wow.
bounced all around. But it
Wow.
was really cool because it was through the business school, actually. So we had like business cases we worked on, and in the
Wow.
free time, the whole time, I was practicing the Spanish.
Right.
Um,
And maybe sipping on some cerveza and tequila, possibly.
There was quite a I have a love of tequila, and I think that's where it was born.
Well, I love
And it
that.
and it treats my body well, I have to say, more so than other alcohols, so
What are some of your favorite tequilas? Because I also love a good glass of tequila.
I just keep going back to Don Julio.
Yeah, nothing wrong
I
with
love
Uncle
it.
Don. Yeah, Uncle Don
Yeah,
he's the guy.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I like that.
love it.
But I mean, were you a organizational leadership major from the beginning? In freshman?
No,
No.
no, and no, and Miami University, it's liberal arts, and I went in kind of open, undeclared, and it wasn't until probably partway through that I did start in the business school. I knew that much. Like I had kind of picked that lane that I wanted to work with teams. I wanted to be in, the business type of environment, but you really don't know what that means until you start getting into it.
Right.
Um, and yeah, there were just I got really lucky and had some really interesting professors along the way, and that is what I believe. When somebody's so passionate about something that they're doing, even if you're not interested, they can really pull you in.
Yes. Yeah.
But I was lucky at like poked at something that was very much alive in me. I was trying to make sense of anyway. It's like how do all these things connect? And I love the idea of not just, self growth and like climbing a ladder, but like how do you create more from the sum of the parts? That was
Right.
the thing that kind of like got me
Right.
into organizational leadership. And honestly, the complexity of it was
Yeah.
really interesting to me.
Yeah, I was. I mean, I've interviewed over 120 people on the podcast, and
Amazing.
yeah, I was surprised that the organizational leadership was an undergraduate major because it is complex, right? So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, very interesting. So,
It actually was pretty new when that was the other piece. I'm like, I'm down for an experiment.
yeah, there you
I think it
go.
was like a year in. I'm like, this sounds great.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So, what was your first job right out of college, and how'd you get it?
My first job, um, gosh, I'm trying to think how I got it. I became aware of it through a career fair, but then it was really like the ongoing networking. And I started in the September following. So I kind of had a summer where I continued to do like I served in a restaurant and did all the things that I was already doing to make money, but it was
Sure.
with USG.
Okay.
So they are, a huge manufacturing Fortune 500. If you know sheetrock,
Yep.
wallboard, that's
Yep.
their brand, like
Yeah.
Kleenex and tissue.
Right.
And the opportunity was really interesting, actually. I was a little hesitant because it was an HR supervisor role, which I had not, yes, I overlapped and I was in HR and pieces of that, but that was not my intention or like my end goal.
Right.
But the particular opportunity was really cool because it was in what was in Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Virginia area.
Oh, not a
And
bad place to start.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
was curious and I'm like, I can go move somewhere new. And um they were building a high-speed line through an existing 25-year-old plant. And so they had already established there were two plant managers, two HR managers, so one for the existing and one for the future.
Okay.
And then there was this whole change initiative that was happening because everybody working there had to basically get retrain, be upskilled, not have maintain focus because it's very safety oriented. And then it was much more like a physical manual and converting over to like robotics, computerized. And so
Right.
there was that whole layer of change. So everybody had to reapply for their jobs. And then additionally, we needed a lot more people. So we had to hire like a whole new group of about 30 people
Oh,
and
wow.
then merge those cultures. So
Wow.
it was like a really fascinating,
Almost like a startup within a, you know, established company. Very interesting.
yeah,
Um,
it was an incredibly interesting first exposure to change management. And when I tell people like I was like doing change, I wasn't like the Bobs, right? Like I wasn't like from Office Space, a
right.
consultant coming in. It
Right.
was from within a culture, from
Right.
within a company, and that part was really cool to see the inner workings. And yeah, it
So
was
what?
great.
I know titles are very interesting, and but would it says supervisor, HR supervisor? Did you actually have a team of people underneath you, or they just gave you that title?
It was a little bit of adjacent. So it was just
Yeah.
like leadership roles
Right.
or activities, I should say,
Yeah.
versus people. So I worked directly with the other managers, like the
Yeah.
engineering manager and all
Yeah.
the supply chain
Yeah.
manager, and pieces like that, and then did a lot of training for the workforce
Right.
and all the different levels. So, but what was interesting was the in that role at that time was the managing up and down and across. And
Right.
The, I had two bosses and then two bosses' bosses,
Oh, wow.
it was quite intriguing.
You got a master's degree in kind of corporate politics and
Yeah.
in your
Yeah.
first job because so you went. It looked like you went there for you were there for about 6 years. Got transferred, looked to Baltimore, and then
Yeah.
kind of came to Kansas City. Were they like all
Yeah.
promotions and
Yeah, well, and it was this overlapped. I mean, I started at USG in 2005, so come 2008, we there was like the whole housing crisis and
right?
everything was kind of a lot of my peers were being laid off,
Oh, right, yeah.
frankly. And
Not
so
as much sheetrock being sold.
Yeah, it was directly tied to
Yeah.
the housing market, right? And
Yeah.
so a way for me to my bosses were amazing advocates. I should say at that point it was down to the one um and saw the potential, and I moved temporarily to Baltimore and then ended up being offered a full-time role to support the Baltimore plant from that angle. And unfortunately, the change I experienced there, given the climate, was we were doing line shutdowns, and I had to do a lot of face-to-face, person-to-person layoffs. And
Wow.
there, that was excruciating. I never want to do that again.
Yeah.
But I will say it gave me a full appreciation for, which I already had, but like it stuck with me, like the how important human dignity is, and
Mm-hmm.
like seeing someone. I hate the line like it's business, it's not personal. Well, it is personal to that
Right. Yeah.
individual, right? Um, so yeah, that was interesting. Then yes, I came to Kansas City, and they have a plant in North KC that's just a paper plant. And
Okay.
yeah, had some really interesting times there. It was great. Good people.
Yeah, but what a great training background. I mean, really, for your first job out of college, you saw so much. Yeah, outside of having to kind of let go of people and, be exhausted at the end of the day after, X number of conversations where, people are crying in front of you and things like that. Like, what was your other big learning there?
Maybe this was already there a little bit, but I think it planted the seed of leading from influence, that you do not need the title to be effective, that you actually need to be able to work cross collaboratively. And the amount of buy-in and rapport building and trust that is required to then actually create change. It's a creative process. Like you can't just come in, like there was a lot of resistance from the folks who were working on the line of like, oh, new person, new flavor, what's the,
Right.
and so that was one piece. The other piece is like coming back to the people, just the range of positions from like an hourly, just starting individual on the line to like, engineering managers, and the level of drive and passion, and everybody wants meaning and mattering.
Right.
Again, regardless of where you sit in an organization, it takes all the pieces and all the
Right.
individuals like showing up to make a thing work.
Yeah,
And
100%.
so, and the people make it really interesting. Like if you
Yeah.
can keep the culture connected and real and authentic and open, transparent. Um, that was the other big thing I will say, like, and I always say through any change, the most important thing is communication, transparent
Right.
communication over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
And
so
listening is
critical.
part of
Yeah.
that, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not just talking at, you gotta
Yeah.
also do the other half.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that experience for you early on, first job because first company because you experienced so much and working across manufacturing and hourly wage and salaried and executives and yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. So
Yeah.
what made you leave USG?
I think at the time it was still kind of a bit stagnant. It had gone to more, it felt like more typical HR type functions. There wasn't as much like expansion opportunity or growth in the lane of change. We did some really amazing things, but like for example, I forget the name of the program, but I negotiated with the state to get everybody there. It's basically like paid furlough, so they could work every other week and not lose employment or benefits
Oh
or
wow.
all the things.
Oh wow.
But that was a major morale. It's like, yes,
Yeah.
thank you for not firing us, but also they were used to overtime. They were used to,
Yeah.
but the environment did not, we could not, we had
Right.
to weather that storm. So I wouldn't call it burnout, but I was just sensing a piece of like I was like
Yeah.
a little bit stuck. And
Yeah.
so I started looking elsewhere for some things,
Yeah.
and going to networking events and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, and so it also looked like you took a shortly after leaving USG, you took like a sales role with Lever One.
I
Talk about that
did.
pivot.
Yeah. So This was a period, I think. So while I was trying to figure things out, like before that, even I was with a Samson Dental. I took Samson Dental Practice Management. I think it's a long
Right,
title.
right.
But they were curious. That was my leap off
Yeah,
into like, okay,
yeah,
because they were expanding and we're going to be opening multiple locations
right,
across multiple states. And so the change opportunity was there. Well, then that growth eventually, after a little bit of being there, the growth wasn't happening.
right.
So that was like an interesting now what moment. And I had a great performance review, and then the position was eliminated.
Oh, shit.
So it was
Yeah,
like, oh.
yeah,
Um,
right.
and I will say, like, I guess I'm a bit of a recovering perfectionist and a bit of a high achiever. So that was like a major identity, like, wait, what is happening? Right.
Right.
And kind of in that moment, I was doing a lot of things. I will say I did some of the career transition kind of placement. I tried some of that. And through that, I found like Kaufman Fast Track, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah.
And while I was like in the midst, I never stopped networking and I started to meet folks in the startup community. And I'm like, what is this like whole startup thing? So, yeah, in that whole evolution, I found I ended up doing Lever One was interesting because it was a startup. Basically, it was a startup PEO at the time, and I could bring some of the HR experience as kind of a consultant on their team, but
Right,
also like, get into the sales of like
right,
what is the
right.
startup.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, so I was there for about a year and getting more and more intrigued by, honestly, I felt like I found my people in the startup scene because it
yeah,
was a good blend of the change, like what is possible as individuals and groups of people. I think, entrepreneurs it's like you create something from scratch, right?
right.
You have a
Yeah,
vision and there is nothing, and then there is after a lot of hard work. I learned of this opportunity with an organization called Up Global, which is now no longer, it was acquired by Techstars. But Up Global was really interesting because they ran experiential programs for folks interested in entrepreneurship. And it was global. So they had all of the people running the programs were volunteers. And
oh
those
wow,
volunteers were typically entrepreneurs themselves. And so
interesting.
my role as a regional manager director, I had 21 states, and anyone running one of our programs or multiple programs in those in cities within those states, I worked with them. And that was another really
Wow.
interesting leading from influence. Like they didn't report to us.
Right.
They didn't,
Right.
um, and we still relied on them to deliver the programs. And so what was interesting there was so many layers, but the ecosystem building and how it all fits together, like that to me was a really great example of how organizational change, like it's like on the macro.
Sure.
Um, and so how it all interconnects is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Um, and then working with those individuals, besides just being really awesome, intriguing people, like I didn't know it at the time, but I think behind the scenes, I was coaching a lot. I wasn't certified as a coach yet, but there was a lot of, um, connect. Hey, I think you need to talk to Atlanta because they're at this phase of growth, and then a lot of the, frankly, like moving people away from ego to ecosystem.
Right.
They like wanted to claim, hey, I started the startup scene in, Huntsville. I'm like, okay,
Right.
let's roll it back and like let's look at what is already out there. Let's not recreate the wheel. Where can you fill a gap? And like I would help through questions,
Yeah.
which is coaching, like find ways and then get them connected to resources where they felt isolated. And
Yeah.
so,
Interesting.
yeah, it was fascinating.
Yeah.
It was great. And the whole time I worked with Up Global, I was physically in the Sprint Accelerator and working as a partner with that team.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that's how I knew.
Okay, so talk about
after.
like was UP Global when you were the senior regional director manager? Was that a business development was part of your job, or was it just program management?
Program
Yeah,
manager
yeah,
mostly, and
yeah,
working with the folks who were running our various programs. So they had, like, some people would probably know Startup Weekend,
yeah.
Startup Week. There was something called Startup Next, Startup Fill in the Blank.
Right,
There were
right.
a lot of different
Yeah,
programs.
yeah,
They were pretty phenomenal
yeah,
for getting people hands-on experiential learning.
yeah. To go back to lever one for a minute, though, that was a sales business development role. What kind of you made a pivot from kind of the HR, short stint with Samson Dental Practice Management, but talk about that 13, 14 months you worked at lever one. What did you learn in terms of sales about yourself, and how did you learn how to sell?
Going back, like, this was the first thing after that small, like, few month gap after the position elimination. So I had really, like, gone down personally and then brought myself back up again and really expanded my horizon around, like, well, what am I open to? What could I learn? And the appeal for that one in particular was, like, because it was new. And I'm like, that would be like, I'm not trained in sales, but I have enough to talk about what the HR and what the service is that I
Right.
could learn. But it was, it's hard. It's a hustle. I
Yeah.
think I'm never scared of a challenge, but what I did in a lot of ways, even though I wasn't at the top of that company, like, not literally the face, I was kind of acting as the face of the company, going
Sure.
out to all these different um, meetings, connections, networking groups, and just building rapport, getting to know people, really listening to what they need, trying to be of service, even if we didn't directly have something that would fit. It's like, oh, let me connect you with so and so, and just being known as that type of connector. That felt, it's so much more relational than the now running my own thing. People say, like, it's a numbers game and all the things, and I'm
Yeah,
like,
I know.
oh, that is soul sucking.
I
Like, I
know it
need,
is. It's terrible. It's like,
yeah.
okay, it's
Um, yeah, so I learned a lot. I learned I never want that to be my full-time gig, but I also
yeah,
learned, frankly, like, there's a lot of overlap to leading from influence. Like,
sure.
in a way, like, you're selling no matter what. I just don't ever want it to be transactional. I want it
Right.
to be relational.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So was there a person that was a mentor, a book that you relied on, or just kind of you just learned as you went using some principles you had learned in the HR space?
I think I learned as I went, and there
Yeah.
were probably, like, there's not one, but a tapestry of mentors. Definitely one to soak up wisdom
Right.
wherever I can find it. And I think it's really like watching other people who do it well, just kind of being open to observation and, like, does that, let me try that on. Okay, that
Right.
doesn't fit for me, but that
Yeah.
works, and this does, and it
Yeah.
doesn't, and yeah,
Yeah.
tweaking it that way.
Yeah, interesting. So talk. When we first met, I just was so intrigued on this, Sprint now T-Mobile accelerator. You look like
Yeah.
you went there in 2015, had about a 9-year run, and so talk about that experience and what you were doing.
I mean, it's crazy when I hear 9 years. I'm like, in hindsight, it makes so much sense, but I never would have thought I would have stayed anywhere 9 years,
Right.
necessarily. But it was because there was so many layers of change and opportunity. And when I first took the role, it became available. I was working side by side with the team there. Saw, when the dust settled and they opened up the space, like, I was there from the get-go to see the magic. And I loved Up Global. And it had a wide breadth, like 21 states, all the people, there was travel involved. And I was craving a little more depth, and, like, what is possible if I go deep in one community, one corporation. Like,
Yeah.
I wanted to flip that a little bit at that point. And when that opportunity came about, somebody left the team, there was an opening. We started talking immediately. I'm like, what would this look like?
Right.
And so I stepped in. I don't even remember what, I think it was program manager, um, what the title was, but it was just what sat in the possibility of what could be built, um, was always so interesting to me. And so, yeah, I stepped into a role and caught up really quickly around things that would had already been going, the co-working Wednesdays and things like that. And there was a mentor network. And so I immediately took that on. But then I slowly started making everything my own and looking for the gaps and what wasn't being served. And, even with the mentor network, like we blew that up. Like it was not just Sprint mentors. We worked with over the span of, I think, 6 years is how long that ran. When I ran it, we worked with 35 different corporations, and had people director and above level who would come in and serve, which I was coordinating, and doing the content and all of that. And then it was all local Kansas City early stage startups. And so that was a really rich way to kick off and see ecosystem at work, and like all just the ripple effects basically that would
Sure.
come about from that. The other piece is like while I was watching the actual accelerator program, which, applications would open, they would recruit worldwide. About 10 or so were chosen every time and they'd come in. Watching that program and being kind of secondary support for a while around that, was I started to notice a gap in how we were providing for those founders. And so, and probably I was at a point where I was craving this personally,
Right.
my own like growth and evolution, but
Right.
it just seemed like they had to be about their results. And I wouldn't have called it this then, but it felt kind of transactional and it was a pressure cooker by
Right.
nature, the accelerator. And so I created a whole over 4 years, a leadership growth program for founders. The low hanging fruit was like DISC certification. And so I
Right.
would offer that kind of as a Trojan horse,
Right.
frankly, to then have a
Yeah.
deeper conversation.
Sure.
I, on my own time and dime, got certified as a human potential coach to understand the actual craft and art and science of coaching, and would offer that to founders. And so, and then over time, brought them in a cohort alongside the normal content, which I was sourcing and running behind the scenes. Like I brought in most of the experts and handled the content for the founders in our program. um, I would take them through like a safe, brave space where they could be with other CEOs, take off the mask for a minute, and talk about how scary it is to feel like you're not going to make payroll, right? Or
Right.
how isolating it can feel. Like there was actual programming and content that we went through, but and also some of the good stuff. Like how do you think about like what's your relationship with time and being up against time? And that's where I started to re-dip my toes into like flow science and things
Yeah.
like that. But the other really cool thing that I love that I started at the accelerator was intentional collisions.
Are you drowning in boring corporate communications? Palacio and Partners is here to rescue you. We transform internal podcasts from snooze fest to must-listen content that actually connects your team and strengthens your culture. Imagine podcast episodes that make your employees laugh while staying informed. Our founder, Jeff Palacio, doesn't just create podcasts. He creates conversations that break through the noise. Whether you're a growing startup or a massive corporation, we turn your company's story into audio gold. Leadership becomes human. Remote teams feel connected. Your message cuts through the clutter. Palacio and Partners, where corporate communications gets a fun makeover. Let's make your podcast work harder than your email inbox ever could. Jeff is happy to share his insights on podcasting with you. You can contact him via LinkedIn or schedule a Zoom call via the link in the episode description.
other really cool thing that I love that I started at the accelerator was intentional collisions. And that was a whole program where it's like we would have, pick any topic that comes to mind. We would have like think of that as the lightning rod, the topic, the theme, and then we'd intentionally bring people from corporate, from startup, from universities and get them in the same room and have a couple speakers and then have people break out and
Right.
like areas. And then the thought was this is the catalyzing event, and then you go do stuff outside of here together.
Right.
So like blockchain, for example, was one of the
Yeah. Yeah.
topics. It was super interesting to hear the speakers and see who showed up and then see what people continued to like do after that. And I loved that. We ran that for probably about a year and a half.
It sounded like you're the person you work for, or the people over time, it gave you a lot of autonomy. It seemed like you kind of were, I mean, I'm sure you had a foundational program, but it seems like you brought a lot of your own, things, initiatives to make it better. So talk about that.
It's like who chose who, right? Like I don't know that I would have taken roles that felt really like command and control, but you don't really know that until you get into the space. And for the most part, I've worked with some really amazing individuals, and that like freedom, that autonomy was so necessary. But then I I'm one that really does take initiative, and I'm like always watching and looking and again connecting dots and seeing a need, and like if I wasn't the one to meet the need, like I just like share the need. Like, here's
Right.
something I'm observing. Are you guys seeing this too? Is this ours? Should we let a like partner in the community like know about this? Is somebody already doing this? So there was always like that level of investigation before, I would start making moves to create something. But yeah, it did seem like when there's a need, a gap to be filled, frankly, when I started reaching out, this kind of, I don't mean this to sound dark, but it is what it is. But when I was in the accelerator and I started bringing some of I got the coaching certification and started building up the leadership growth program, there was a real problem with like founder suicide, for example, and the wellness conversation, well-being around high achievers in general. And I saw um, characteristics and red flags in myself too. I'm like,
Yeah.
whoa, 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 let's reevaluate here, right? Like because it just seemed like there were so many, you can run, run, run and try to meet all the outer expectations, but then if it's not connected and aligned and like on purpose, um, you're going to end up feeling really burnt out. You won't be of service to anyone. And so, yeah, it was a really interesting time to be investigating all of that. I'll say on the side, like I'm kind of a nerd for biohacking, which I don't love that term, but like the
Right.
optimizing self and all of
Yeah.
that. I went pretty deep into it for a while, and it really satisfied that part of me that loved like the human system and the
Right.
science and the neuroscience.
Right.
And
Right.
um, but there's a dark side to some of that too, where it's like you're just going so deep and relying on these things to get better, like make yourself a machine and measure against
Yeah.
metrics. And I'm like, but where's the human element, right? Like,
Yeah.
where's the meaning? And so my pendulum personally, I love the science of it. I love the gadgets. I could totally nerd out, but um, I had to find my own kind of middle, like what's my minimum viable product? Like what can I do with just
Right.
me, right? And show the part that's appealing was always like the I think the definition that comes to mind is like it's the art and science of controlling the environment inside and around you so you can show up as you choose. And to me, that part is really important. So, like, where's your agency? What
Right.
can you control? What can
Right.
you influence? And how do you choose to show up?
Yeah.
So, a lot of that is a through line, and a lot of the
Yeah.
actual work I do, but it's been an evolution for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'm a big Tim Ferriss fan, and he
Yeah,
kind of is in the biohacking. I think it's Dave
Dave
Asprey, the
Asprey.
Bulletproof
Yep.
Coffee. I didn't like Dave as much because I felt like when you listen to Dave, he just wanted to sell his products to you. like that's what I felt. But
Yeah.
anyhow, yeah, but I totally get that. I love Ryan Holiday and his work, his books, and one of his quotes from one of his I can't remember which book was, we're human beings, not doings.
Oh,
And
yes, I know that one.
yeah, I mean
So
that
good.
to me, I mean, because you get so caught up, like you want to just be. I need to be productive every minute, like I'm awake, and it's crazy because it's impossible. It's just like you can't
Yeah.
work out every waking hour or every waking minute because your body's going to collapse. It's the same thing. You need mental breaks. We talked before we went on air, about you need to laugh.
Yes.
If you take time for yourself to do something you love to do and play, whatever that is, you're a better, leadership coach. You're a better podcast creator or host, right? You're whatever
Yeah.
it is you do. And I think there's a great book that I just read, Chase Jarvis, Never Play It Safe. I mean, he talks
Ooh,
about,
okay, I love that
you know,
title.
yeah, it's so good because you know past generations, including the ones we're in, probably less years than mine, but you went to high school, you went to college, you got a job, you worked hard, you got married, you bought a house, you had kids, like your life was like planned out, but it's not like there's so many choices, and you don't have to that that path is not for everyone, right? So you don't, but people were just not robotically in it, but I mean, I know for myself, I'm like, yeah, I did well in high school, grade wise. I wanted to go to college. Me and my brother were
Yeah.
first generation to go to college in our family. Um, and it's, I'm like, I gotta get a job. I'm going to work hard, and get married and buy a house and have, all that thing. So it's so different now. And I think, the pendulum is swinging the other way, and that's good because, we're going to be healthier people. And I think you're not going to lose productivity, as COVID showed. When people
Right.
start working at home, productivity went up because they controlled when they worked. They could do it on their own time. They didn't feel, as pressured.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um,
Love it.
yeah, talk a little bit more. I did. You talked about flow science, and when I read some of the information you sent me, your programs today. I don't want to skip forward, but I think it's a
Yeah.
good time to talk about it. But integrating, leadership principles, flow science, and uh, human control system.
Human centered
Yeah,
systems.
human
I
centered.
think.
Yeah, systems
Yeah.
thinking. So yeah,
Systems thinking by human
talk
centered
about
systems.
that flow science and the human centered systems thing. Thinking it's very interesting.
Yeah, it's so flow and I will say this is another area I dipped really deep. I've been aware of it. It's been around probably forever, but it was like coined back in the 70s by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi.
Yes, the guy I can't pronounce his name that had the book.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. It's very long.
Yes. Thank you.
Rolls
That
off the
that was a
tongue.
great pronunciation. You've been practicing
Thank
that. That's
you.
good.
Yeah, it's no, I've been interested in that for a long time, and I think it does get at the what can you do just with your own we kind of have chemistry sets within our bodies, like what can we do to leverage that and activate that when you can go into deep focus. So I did go pretty deep into this, and I recently decided to get another coaching certification, which I'm always like, do I really, like I have to be
Right.
careful, but this was
Yeah, you do have a lot of
a
certifications. I
very
did notice that.
intentional one because it was with the Flow Research Collective, and they had a peak performance flow coaching program, and it's very interesting. Um, Goes really deep into personal flow, but it touches on group or team flow.
Right.
So there was a lot of really interesting overlap for the world that I come from, and now. But yeah, flow at the basic level is just how you feel and how you perform. It's when you feel and perform at your best,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
an optimized state of consciousness where you perform and feel at your best.
Yeah, for
And
an athlete, it's, being in the zone, right? And
exactly,
and it's for us, it's like we lose track of time.
exactly.
We're so
Yeah,
focused on the, task at hand because, there's a love and passion around it, and so you lose track of time. So
Yeah, it's
that's yeah.
fueled and it's hyper engagement. It's fueled by intrinsic motivation. There are a lot of the intrinsic motivation. Autonomy is one of them, by the way, like intrinsic motivators. But
Hmm.
the other piece that's nice besides time is like that kind of inner critic and all the outer noise, like
Right.
fades away too. You're just
Yeah.
like clicked in. So it originally was found and noticed in sports and like, things like, I don't know, skiing and, like that
Yeah,
kind of
no, Tim, I think it's Tim
thing.
Galloway, The Inner Game of Tennis. It's
Yes,
talked
yes,
about there. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But everybody has the capability to do it, and it really shows up in work and in teams.
Hmm.
People get into flow often when they're
Yeah.
doing their work,
Right.
if it's aligned. And so that, yeah, that's been,
Yeah.
I kind of baked that into a lot of what I coach and facilitate in the programs. The human-centered system thinking is interesting because it's a way of leading change. It's design thinking, so it's iterative, but it's putting the human need at the center of the problem, right? It's not so it always has that element, like how can we create the best solution for the most people? Who are the stakeholders? Lots of stakeholder mapping, kind of seeing the macro and how it
Hmm.
like interconnects. There's a really just the practice of leveraging different lenses. Like, how do we want to think about this? Is this the way, like relationships, like how are they connected, or is it process flow? Or and so it's just really good. They're great frameworks and tools for how to think about really complex systems.
Yeah.
And with the world just continues to change faster and get more complex. And I think people and leaders need to be able to be adaptable and show up and meet this moment. And we need tools like this. We've gotten to a point where we can't do a whole lot as individuals. Like we can do a lot more as a collective kind of co-creation. And these are the methods of creating the co-creation, I
Right.
guess, going
Yeah. No, I
and
love
doing the
that.
practice of that.
Yeah.
Um,
So
yeah,
yeah, so you're enjoying the Sprint T-Mobile Accelerator. You're doing some great work. You're probably in flow a lot because you really like what you're doing. So looks
yeah,
like at some point you're kind of get into your side gig. You're probably a couple of years, 2, 3 years, 4 years into this accelerator position, but then do your own company. Upward and inward. So talk about that, and as a side gig, and at some point you decide to leave the mothership of T-Mobile,
yeah.
and so talk
Yeah, and
about that.
it was running kind of on the side for a while. Yeah, that was created. The LLC was created in 2018, and at that point, I was just coaching high achievers, entrepreneurs. It was nights and weekends. It was a really interesting way because I got my certification. I was coaching maybe 10 entrepreneurs through the actual accelerator. So I needed more. Um, I wanted to be having more conversations. Um, at some point, several things personally overlapped. So it had my first child late 2019, early, like I think it was February of 2020 when I returned to work. And I'm like, coming off of this, like being away, trying to reintegrate. And then it's like a month later, it's like, just joking, everyone go back home. There's
Right.
this thing called COVID.
Right.
And so that happened. And then, the Sprint and T-Mobile merger happened a month after that. And so there's just so many layers of change in the world and in my personal world.
Wow.
So when that was happening, I let any existing clients kind of roll off. I needed that time back. I needed that focus. Um, and Upward and Inward basically was a bit dormant there for a bit.
Right.
As far as actively using it, the LLC was maintained and the
Right.
idea was always to do a lot more. Um, but yeah, like anytime you're on an innovation department, like you're kind of on the chopping block.
Right. Yeah.
So we didn't know how how it would be perceived when the merger went through. And luckily, they actually were like, wow, there's a lot of value here, and doubled down and gave resources. And what did happen is it started to shift to being more T-Mobile centric. Like they were the main customer, and
Yeah.
we were, still working with entrepreneurs because we had to move out of the space and all of that during COVID. We already were global slash mostly national. And so the community involvement expanded there. We were doing a little bit less in person in Kansas City. And so that was starting to weigh on me. And I think the direction that it started going is probably a good one, but it was focusing on rapid, like technical solutions, like technical prototyping, that type of thing. And yeah, so on a personal level, I didn't feel like the things I had created had a place. I felt like they did, but it was not as highly valued at the moment, and only like 10 or so were coming through at a time, or however many cohorts. It was limited, is my point.
Right.
There were constraints. So there was a piece of me that wanted to have more impact, and I wanted to grow more in that direction. At the same time, I just feel like I've been personally noticing in the wider world, beyond like the rapid pace of change, just polarization, a sense of people being disconnected from themselves, from each other.
Right.
And I wanted to be a part of helping to have a conversation to reconnect. And so that was really my, like, about a year and a half before I went out on my own, I got serious and started laying the groundwork to really build this out more intentionally around upward and inward, to work with impact leaders. And it's been a really interesting ride so far. It's just been 1 year out on, full time, but my work is about helping leaders and teams reconnect, reignite, hopefully thrive and flourish. We address the root causes of disconnection from the inside out. And I have a whole framework that, we don't have to get into here necessarily, but it takes people through the layers of connection, my framework. And to boil it down super simply, it's self or individual, then interpersonal, then systems, and then beyond legacy. Um, and it's multidimensional, right? Like, so for me, when everything I've watched, been a part of, led, uh, it takes enormous levels of inner work and outer work.
Right.
And so I've been thinking about this phrase a lot lately, like, how do you merge the awareness with the action?
Right.
Because you can go really deep and be super aware, but then what do you do with that? Like, it's
Right.
not doing any good unless you like do something. And then on the opposite end of the extreme, you can have people who are, the fast fixes, give me solutions, like
Right.
taking action, but disconnected from how the maybe personal awareness,
Right.
self-awareness, but also like the layers of stakeholders, how that ripple effect, how can you bring others along more
Right.
intentionally? That's where the like human-centered systems thinking comes together. My 4D impact leadership program is a year long because it does take, it's like not something you can sit in it for a day. It like
Yeah.
takes time. And I will be rolling out some mid-tier type things, but it's really for teams and next level leaders who are like, when you think about the type of leaders we need at all levels, like we need people who can be adaptable, who can scan this rapidly changing environment, see opportunities and challenges and threats, and bring solutions, collaborate, like bring people along. It's again the ecosystem over the ego
Right.
system.
Yeah.
Like that, it's just we have got to like shift. And so yeah, it's the people I've worked with so far have been so interesting. Like that's the other piece. I'm like, now you got me going. Um, from a coaching standpoint, a facilitation standpoint, I think the thing I love about the craft of coaching is like it's always, you don't know. like you go into it and it's not like, hey, you're giving advice, we're going here. It's like you're holding space for what will come about. It's inherently co-creating with one-on-one or in a group facilitation. You're create the solutions come about because of the wisdom in the group. And so pulling that, or in the individual, I believe that like everybody is creative, resourceful, and whole. Asking good questions can really bring deep insights out in the right moment. And then how resourceful you have, like resources, we all have resources around us. It's just like when we're in that fear zone, we don't feel like we have access to that. So that mentality, I think, when I, what Upward and Inward does, a lot of it is culture work. If there could be a coaching culture, that would be great, but it's not literally the act of coaching. It's that like curiosity, creating, it's innovative. It's all of the things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So is it I love the 12-month thing because I think that's very important. But is it the cohorts, are they internal to a company, or you blended different companies are participating? How is the actual program?
Yeah. It's I'm so glad you asked actually, because the when I had that time of building between before I went out on my own, I thought it would be a mixed cohort, and then another opportunity came along and I'm like, let's do. So I've been doing it like teams, working with a team, um building it out. And that part is really interesting because it's a shared context and environment, and when they're working and growing and holding each other accountable, and there's a lot of growth that happens there, and then it actually trickles over into the culture much more directly. But I will be doing an open cohort where folks can either self-nominate, or a leader could send one or two high achieving individuals. And where that becomes interesting is the cross industry, the people who challenge perspectives, and they're not in your world of manufacturing or IT, or they're coming from a different lens, and that's actually really helpful.
Yeah, I could
So I'm
definitely.
excited to see how it goes.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And in terms of you talk about pivotal moment in history, so I think you kind of reference some of it. But when you talk about that, is that from a leadership perspective, or just the future of work, or us as human beings? What is your when you talk about the pivotal moment in history right now?
I It's probably really personal for everybody, but it does seem they're just like a lot of overlapping gigantic changes happening at once. And it's, yeah, the future of work and AI and what's that going to mean. There's um the global political, there's a lot of polarization happening no matter where you live, around, or where you stand on either side. There's a
Right.
lot of like, we're on this team and we're not talking to this team, and pointing like everyone who's not you is evil. um there's some pretty, like climate change. There's some big
Yeah.
issues and things in the world that absolutely require collaboration, and creative solutions that are probably tying a lot of different solutions together all at once. And so yeah, I think it's many things. um and again, like there's also something else that doesn't get named as often, but I think what I've been noticing is the disconnection is, um, we outsource our thinking sometimes. We, uh, the phones are amazing. Like I'm all about technology and I use all of the things, but it can also be such a crutch, and people are forgetting how to interact with one another a little bit,
Yeah.
or even go deep within yourself, right? Like it's like being bored is terrifying. I'm like, no, be bored. Like
Right.
go, like figure something out, right? Like we don't
Yeah.
need to like fill our time. You talked about this before, but like when I used to, for myself, and when I would coach founders, I would call it hustling for worth,
Yeah.
right? Like it's like
Interesting.
that, like
Yeah.
turning,
Yeah.
like to try to, and that's a really shitty place to be. Like
Right.
nobody feels like they matter. Nobody feels, they don't get meaning out of that.
Right.
Um, it's it's a bit numbed out. And so I want more people, as cheesy as this may sound, like I want more people coming alive, like
Yeah.
reconnecting with themselves, with each other, with a purpose, and then like doing something about it.
Yeah. No, it's a
Yeah.
great goal. I love that. Ari, I love helping two groups of people. One is that recent college graduate. We're recording here in June 4th, 2025. So last month in May, a lot of young adults graduate college, going to go get their first post-college job. What advice would you have them for their job search as well as starting their career?
Don't attach to title too much, attach to like what you see the growth path potential being. And I think it's really interesting to look at skills to like, do you see a problem that can be solved? Can you lean into that? Like, do you see something you could really just like blow out of the water? Like, because every role I've been in, I've created my own role basically.
Right.
And there's so much more opportunity out there than the role, the job description. Also, jobs aren't posted unless you like they are posted, but like the more people you know, there's more opportunities
Right.
than are apparent.
Right.
Um, and then the other thing I would say is maybe just put yourself in uncomfortable situations. Like take yourself to networking groups that are completely outside of where you would normally go, like adjacent. I think there's really interesting connections to be made that aren't in your same kind of echo chamber, let's
Right.
say.
Yep.
And that's how you learn interesting things, meet new people. I have found the most random gems
Right.
out about, and it feels awkward. You're like, I don't know anybody here, and
Right. Right.
I don't know what to talk, but
Yeah.
you just go, and people are people, and you'll be fine.
Yeah. No, I love that. Thank you for that. And as we talked about earlier, you don't have to have people underneath you in an org chart, to be a leader. But those that do want to take that career path from individual contributor and, be responsible for a team of people on an org chart, what advice do you have for them as they take that first leadership type role?
I would be very clear about your own values and creating your own, like your leadership style. I think so many people repeat the way they've been led without like engaging in how they would choose to show up, and think about how you wanted to be heard, how you wanted to be trusted with autonomy, and like how much more capable you felt than maybe the opportunities that were offered reflected. And how can you create that type of environment within your team where people feel not only like safe or like welcome to be there, just exist, but like they're actively, proactively like bringing ideas, solutions, like, hey, I know, like think
Right.
of that, right? And try to lead from that place.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I would say from my own experience, especially early on in my early leadership roles, I I took, I was always me, but I think I took part of my manager's personality, which is
Mhm.
sometimes good, sometimes not so good, and, because I thought, oh, I'd look better if I kind of emulate, my manager style. But yeah, I love that advice. Eric, thank you so much for coming on today. I could talk about leadership development and coaching and all this all day long, but thanks for coming on the Corporate Couch today.
This has been so fun. I loved, you're very easy to talk with, and we
Well,
could have gone on much longer for sure, but
there,
it's
there,
wonderful. Thank
yeah.
you.
Have the great rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye.
What a delight Ari was to talk to. I was just it was just fabulous for me. I just, whenever you can get in an episode talking about tequila, Uncle Don Julio, flow state, being in the zone and doing things you love and losing track of time. Being a human potential coach. We talked about biohacking. And just how people want to have meaning and mattering. I had not heard that term before. She's so impressive. I really, really loved the conversation, honestly. And her first job at United States Gypsum, the sheetrock basically company, the Kleenex of the sheetrock industry. What a learning. I mean, out of college and
doing all the things she did there and what she saw from a political perspective, corporate politics and, managing up, down, and across at a young age. I think it was like a master's in kind of change management and leadership and having influence, leading, not by title, but by influence. It was so, I could have talked to her, for another hour. Honestly.
The neat thing about that job experience was that it was with a company whose sole product or singular product is a commodity, which meant that everything that she did about it had nothing to do with the product itself. So she was free to talk about employee development and the politics and things like that, irrespective of what the product was, which is kind of a unique experience. The other thing that I had was at the very end of her conversation during the last two questions that you always ask, she made a comment that it's almost sounded like a throwaway comment, but I wanted to expand on a little bit, where she said almost every job that she had was a job that she created herself, that she had to create her own job. And I thought back on my own experiences that is so true about most of the jobs that I've had in business, is that I might be hired to do job X, in my job description or something like that, but eventually it would work its way into creating a position that does something unique, basically what I wanted to do. And I would challenge all of our listeners to do that kind of thing, is to get yourself in a position where you can promote yourself and promote your job to your boss as what you want to do. I think not only does that make the job more fun and you more effective within that job, but also your boss appreciates that a little bit more. So what that does is it makes you a lot lower maintenance, so that your boss has to pay less and less attention to you, which in turn he'll appreciate, as long as you're doing something creative and something functional and something productive that's benefiting the company. So I thought that was an interesting piece of advice that she pulled out. It was a very interesting interview, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I love that. That's when American Idol first started, Paula Abdul, she would always tell the singers, make the song your own.
Make it yours. Yeah.
Yeah, make it yours. And I think you're going to be more fulfilled on a job, and you're going to be, more in a flow state if you're doing stuff that you thought of that brings you joy and you want to do. You're still trying to achieve the goals of the team and the company, but you're doing it in a way that you're going to want to come to work every day and be passionate about. So I just thought, like I said, that conversation with Ari was just fantastic.
And, this also reminds me of something else, Jeff, that, I've had a lot of jobs in my life. Did you know that one time I worked as a teller in a bank?
No, really?
But I got fired from that. The reason I got fired was an old lady came up to me one time and she asked me to check her balance. So I pushed her over.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.